Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us for the Demystifying Money podcast. I'm your host, Misty Lynch, and today I'm joined by Jennifer Cassara. She is the CEO and founder of Good Robe and Co. and Genesis Consulting, and she's a powerhouse. She has 30 years of experience in retail, wholesale, and she's very passionate about helping women look and feel confident and helping entrepreneurs grow profitable brands and businesses that they love. Jen, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
I am so excited to be here.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
I want to talk to you today because you've done a lot in your career from both different sides of the table, as far as working in corporate, having your own brick and mortar, all of these things, and consulting. And, you were open with me, when we were talking about what we should, delve into on the show about, different thoughts about guilt and money stories that we tell ourselves and how people can start to use money as a tool for growth and really start to love making money, enjoying their business and being a part of it rather than just, feeling like they're holding back. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about, in your bio, we mentioned how you like to, helping people lights you up. And you also like style and coaching. So tell me a little bit more about like when you first realized that helping people in general was your calling.
It's my light up. So I remember even being in college and we'd be getting ready and I always knew how to do like hair and makeup. And so I would always get all of the girls in my sorority ready. And then I would never have time for myself. And I'd be like, my hair's like in a ponytail. Like, I don't even care about how I look. It was just that moment of doing somebody's makeup or doing their hair and seeing their face light up. And that just continued in so many different forms. When I had my stores, it was the same idea. I had 4 boutiques called Bella and Bella's Closet, and Bella's Closet was clothing. And when I'd get women in there who were not feeling confident in their body, and I'm like, you're just not putting the right things on it. And I would get them into the fitting room and I'd throw things at them, and they would come out and to see, their faces, and to see the difference between the woman that walked into the store and the woman who was walking out gave me just such a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. But then I'm also a geek. Like, no, seriously, like I have a mug that said, "Ooh, this calls for a spreadsheet." Like I am an Excel geek.
Okay.
My husband gets so excited. Like he knows. He's like, "Can you help me with a pivot table?" Like, yes. Yeah, when can I do it? Like give me a good V lookup. Like I'm ready to go. And so when I was at the paper store, we were changing systems and I just naturally became the lead and the person who trained all the other buyers on the system. And like again, it's a whole different thing, right? It's not necessarily making somebody feel good, but it's helping somebody feel confident. And I do think it's a skill that just comes from like just naturally from me, in that I love to be helpful. And make people like see that they have the power. Like even showing them systems, it was very much like, what happens if we do this? I'm like, I don't know. Let's find out. Like, let's do it together. Let's, don't be scared. You can't break it. And just giving them that confidence, that they are smarter than they think, or they're, they look better than they think, and it's just finding that power within yourself. So
I think that's great. I mean, and I think a lot of the things that we, enjoy doing or are good at, like a lot of times it's just something that we try doing and a few people were like, wow, I love it, or thank you so much, or you're so good at this. And then I think we start to really believe in ourselves, like when you were doing people's makeup and hair before they went out at night, and I think there is something that's really helpful about that, even if it's just helping somebody like do the like this next step, or like learn something without feeling embarrassed or discouraged and things like that when it comes to even training on a system, because most people are afraid of making a mistake. Most
And
people
have
are,
you ever been trained by somebody who is like sort of condescending?
yeah,
It's
you
like
should know
such
this.
a
And it's like, why? Why would I know this? It's a,
like,
it's a new
breathe. You
system.
know, you need somebody who lets you feel like, okay, I can screw this up,
Yeah.
right? And I'll be fine.
And even with, when you mentioned with the stores and helping people try on different things, a lot of times people are just doing what we did the day before and the day
Right.
before that. And we're not really thinking about anything new or different. So having another perspective can be so helpful, especially when you might be like, oh no, I can't try that. I can't wear that. I just do this. And I think that's something that maybe, helping people or kind of bringing out a different, just helping them try something new without feeling bad about it is such a helpful skill that can translate into so many other areas
I need it
that,
too, by the way. Like I like going to anthropology and having them throw me in a fitting room
Mhm.
and throw me stuff because hey, we're all the same, right? I do the same
Yeah.
things too. You
Hmm.
lean on what you know, and so it's always good when somebody can kind of let you think about something you hadn't thought before.
Yeah, no, and I think it's fun to do that. And I think it is kind of interesting when you have success there and you make people happy, or you can see when people feel good. And, I see that a lot with people with money that are constantly telling themselves that I'm terrible with this, I'm not good with this, I don't know what to do. And then I will find different points where they made great financial decisions and things that they're doing well, but they don't take any time to recognize that they have this capability of doing that. Maybe because they're looking at other people as their lens. And so I think it's super important to just help people know, like, yo, you could do this yourself, or you could have help, and both are fine. Both are fine.
They're good.
So you've had a incredible career so far, from buyer to senior vice president to founder. Can you walk us through that a little bit, about your career journey so far?
Yeah. So I've always had this sort of entrepreneurial streak. So even working corporate, so I started at Lord and Taylor in their executive training program, which is like they used to call that like the boot camp
Mhm.
of buying. Like it would train you, in all the facets. We had like a retail math class because if you work with numbers and you start doing retail numbers, people are like, that's not the right equation. I'm like, it is in retail. Like it's just it's like
It's
an
like paper
Excel.
towel math. I am good with numbers and I don't get it. I don't get it. It's like this roll equals 8 roll, and I'm like, maybe this is something beyond my
Help,
comprehension.
help, right? Like
Yeah.
when I do like markup and stuff for my husband, he's like, really? That's how you do? I'm like, yes. So yeah, it's really it's really interesting that when like I started, I was in this like boot camp or whatever, but it was very structured. And I knew very quickly, like as much as I needed that foundation, I wanted to do something. I always want to be more creative, or
Hmm.
so it led me into, even if it was a corporate job, it's always been a more entrepreneurial from that
Hmm.
point on. So I went from Lord and Taylor to Filene's Basement.
Hmm.
And Filene's Basement was like, I always say you were like moving and grooving. It was negotiating, it was finding great deals. I was in New York every week. You would fly in for 2 days, come back, hit people, see what kind of deals you could get. And so it was as much as it was corporate, it was still very entrepreneurial. But even when I was there, that's when I got like the bug to do my own
Hmm.
stores. And what happened was I would be traveling and I'd see, we'd go to, let's say, the Cape or Newport. And I always felt like there were these great stores in all these kind of like vacation
Hmm.
resorty towns. I
Yeah.
was like, why aren't there any cool stores like that, like in a regular town? So that's how Bella was born. But the thing is that I've always done clothing. So like Bella, which started out as, like I don't know, like candles and
Hmm.
gifts and all of that, home decor, stuff like that. It quickly evolved into clothing, which is where Bella's Closet was. And I just can't stay away from it. Like it's kind of
Hmm.
just my jam. And And then Paper Store at the time didn't really have fashion and jewelry. This was
Yeah.
2008 that I started to work
Mhm.
with them, and they had been coming to my stores, and we kind of touched on this a little bit
Mhm.
privately, but after a while of having your own business, especially stores, and I was growing, wasn't really taking in, like, you're not holding on to the money. It's like kind
Yeah.
of you're constantly like reinvesting
It's
it.
moving around. Yeah, but it's
It's
not going to your, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not getting anything fun out of it.
Mhm.
And so, when I met with them and this idea of going back to corporate, but still they are very, at the time they had 11 stores. Now they have almost, 100. And so to be able to like go there and do that, it felt like I could do what I was doing with my boutiques, but I would get a paycheck.
Mhm.
Which was nice.
Yes. No, and I think that's something that a lot of people, especially, I think we see entrepreneurship kind of glamorized a lot in like social media and like, why are you working this for somebody else's dream? I see these posts all the time,
Yes,
probably because this is but I do feel like there are a lot of benefits um of working in a creative corporate role or team or having a job that gives you a solid paycheck. And I don't think that that's necessarily something people talk about much about trying things or going back or even creating somewhat of a hybrid where, maybe you have a little bit of both. Because I do think there feels like, and I've seen this with some people who get into, selling other products or something like that, where like, oh, well, you'll be successful if you just pray harder or try harder or talk to more people, where for some people might be better suited
right.
for being in a different or a corporate role. So I think that's cool that you didn't say like, no, no, that would be a step back for me. I couldn't do that. I've
Step
done that
back.
before.
Or no, it
It's
was fabulous. I
amazing. It's an
remember getting
opportunity.
my first paycheck.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
just like, what do you want me to do? I'll do it. Like I was just so happy to get paid. I think going back and forth, and that's what I've
Hmm.
kind of always done, is gone back and forth between corporate and, my own endeavors. And I think every step leads you to a different
Hmm.
place, and you almost need, like, what that experience is like. I know now how to scale a business,
Yeah.
right? Because I was with Paper Store when it went from 11 stores to, I think when I left in 2018, there were like 75, 76 stores. And I was a big part of the management team and, helping the growth there. And I feel like I wouldn't be as good of an entrepreneur if I
Hmm.
hadn't had that experience. And so, when do until you scale, you don't know how to scale. So working for somebody who's scaling is, and seeing the system changes and working
Hmm.
through all of that, like it's the learning curve for me was incredible. But what happens is I feel like you get something out of each experience.
Yes.
And I think knowing when to say, okay, like, now what?
Yeah.
When you feel like you're not growing or you're not, and that's me, I get antsy,
Hmm.
after a little while somewhere, and I feel like I'm not evolving. I mean, I was at Paper Store for 10 and a half years because I had so many different
There's so much.
roles,
Yeah.
within the company, and, being able to do like catalog, like, so I learned a ton. And then I just got to a point where I said, okay, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And it was the first time I left a job without having a
Mm.
job or knowing what I was going to do. I literally just left, and yeah, which is so not me. I'm a very like uptight, planned,
Mhm.
and I didn't know. And then some of the, vendors that I worked with, that we bought from at Paper Store, reached out. And
Mhm.
I that's how I ended up now on the wholesale side, which is great because it really gives me like the full view of the
Mhm.
market. And I do feel like my experience as a buyer has tremendously helped me, as on the sales side, because I partner with them in a different way because I
I
understand
understand. Yeah.
what they're dealing with.
I think, it's interesting. You mentioned a few things, especially about like leaving a role without having one. Was that, was there, and I think sometimes we think that there has to be some sort of, you know, crisis or bad break or something that causes that, because a lot of people will stay in the same position for a long time. Um, and they will not leave.
Right.
until things get so bad or they're forced out or they're laid off. What made you feel like it was time to go? Or was it just a gut feeling, or was there some sort of change that kind of instigated it for you?
It was definitely I didn't feel the growth for a while.
Mhm.
Like I kind of felt, and I didn't really, usually I have like in my head, okay, this is next, this is next, this
Hmm.
is next. What mountain are we going to climb
Yeah.
next? And the whole time I was there was always something, whether it was a new system to really, to integrate, or it was, Alex and Ani, which was like, I
Mhm.
managed that and that was a big deal. It was, selling the company for equity. Like there was always something. And I got to the point where I felt like, okay, it was almost like I can leave it in a good place.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
I knew that I did a lot of the financials, and my assistant at the time was incredible, and she's still incredible. And she does all the planning now. And, I kind of knew like, okay, my buyer's in a good place, and I'm that kind of person who's like, oh, how could I leave this position if it's
Mhm.
not in a good place? And
Right.
so it was a combination of everything being in a good place, which is probably why I was kind of antsy.
Yeah.
And I had never not worked from like when I was like 15.
Mhm.
I've been working not and like didn't take like I would work I worked during college, I worked in the summers, and I think I just wanted to walk away. And I think I had this idea that I would figure out what I want. I always say what I wanted to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
And it was literally the worst 6 months of
Mm.
my life, because when you identify with a role or like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm the, at the time, I was like, doing art direction and like in the DMM, like, what are you now? And I panicked.
Mhm.
Like I thought I was going to really enjoy some time off, and
Yeah.
I didn't. So I actually had the idea for Good Robe during this time, and then a company reached out, and I know on the wholesale side and said, would you like to be our sales director? And I was like, yes. I thought I was taking like the safe
Mhm.
route, and the smart decision. And it ended up being a terrible situation, which is also good, right?
Mhm.
And what's funny is I said, oh, maybe I'm just not good at sales.
Yeah.
And, maybe this isn't, a right fit, the wholesale side. I'm a buyer, I'm a buyer, I'm a
Mhm.
buyer. I've always been on the retail side. And it really just, I was there a year and a half, and it was just a really bad situation. And
Mhm.
it culminated in, COVID. And since I was one of the last people, and I was one of the first people out during COVID, and I remember smiling on the Zoom call when I was getting fired, because it was like such a relief to me. And so I made a rule. I said, my next position, I am not going to do wholesale. I am not going to work for a single company,
Mhm.
right? I'm going to do consulting and work for multiples. And I will not work for a family run business, because those were all the
Mhm.
facets of the job that I had just been in. That was terrible. So what happens? Another company reaches out who I'd worked with, who had wanted to hire me when the first company did. And when they heard that I was let go during COVID, maybe 2 weeks into that, they called and they positioned it as wanting consulting. And
Okay.
I didn't know it was like a job interview. So, and I remember saying, oh my God, I love this company so much. I'm like, I can't believe like my first consulting company. And I really like, I almost wish, and they offered me a full-time position, and it was wholesale. It was working for one company, and
Mhm.
it's a family-owned business. So I was like, I'm like, I'm doing everything I said I wasn't going to do, but I love it.
Yeah.
And it actually loving that my day job and what I do, because it fuels me in a different way,
Yeah.
allowed me to do Good Robe,
Mhm.
um, and allowed me to kind of do the entrepreneurial thing that, it's a different bug. It's a different, and it takes years to build, especially an apparel company.
Yeah.
So for me, I think I'd be an idiot if I didn't do something in addition. And I don't know, is it something that I want to do? Like, I'm kind of trying to be open to seeing, how things evolve, and not being so planned,
Yeah.
right? And saying this is how, like seeing the end game. it's more interesting for me now to just kind of go with the flow and just watch everything unfold.
That's a great lesson, I think, for people. And as I've always, like you, we love a good spreadsheet. It makes sense. Like we're high achievers. Like there's a goal, we go get it. We leave things in a good place. There's like a finish line, and then things keep changing. So I love that you kind of mentioned enjoying this process because I do think, and I'll talk to a lot of people that are approaching retirement, and they've never not worked. And then they assume that retirement is just going to be this blissful period, and they haven't figured out what they're going to do or how they're going to spend their time. And they end up feeling quite unhappy in some
Yeah.
situations. And I see how that could be something that I could experience myself just based on how I am, where
It
some
is,
people
it's
are
a
like, I
hard.
know exactly what I would do. I would do this. I'd fill my time this way, where I feel like I might be bored within 3 months. And so I think there's something to kind of understanding that. But I also like the fact that you're just enjoying this process right now because that's life.
Yeah.
Like this is the whole what you're doing. It's not necessarily passing the test, completing the goal. It the launch, all that excitement is good, but really it's that whole process that has to be, you have to be happy while you're in it, or else it's just going to
Yes.
constantly get bigger and further down the road. And so I think that's just such an important thing to learn. And also to be like, okay, I figured out what I don't like here, but being open to other experiences. Instead of just, you could have said, no, you're a family company. No, you're this. And maybe something else would have come up that would have been great. But also, it's not having those hard lines, those rules, and making sure that you're actually, giving something a try, whether it means leaving entrepreneurship and going back to corporate or trying something different. Um,
Yeah,
I think it's
it's
really
cool.
helpful for people to understand that there is no rules. There's no rule book or
No,
like
and
some
there's
right
also
path.
no failing. Like
Yeah.
I think with my first business, I remember being hysterical. Like as much as I couldn't, there was a part of me that was, it was such, you have, 4 stores. It's like
Yeah.
I didn't have a weekend, I didn't have a life, I didn't have money. Um, it was such a burden, yet the thought of losing it to me meant in some ways, as much as like I'd won Best of Austin or I'd done, whatever, all the good things, you tend to, when something ends, think that you've failed.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
Hmm.
And, if I had wanted to continue that forever, I guess, yes, that would have been somewhat of a fail, but I've stopped sort of like there's so many things with business that can go wrong that are outside of you and so many things that can go right that are outside of you and I stopped I think I stopped putting my worth tying my worth to those things where like now I kind of say oh if Good Robe doesn't work it doesn't like doesn't make
Yeah.
me any less of a good entrepreneur or
Yeah.
you can make those changes and you can what's that saying letting go of a mistake even though you've taken so long to make it it's like you
Yeah.
know you have to know like that it's okay to pivot that's worse to me is
Hmm.
when you feel trapped by your own
Hmm.
decisions and having that ability to just kind of go okay, so I was moving this way, but now it doesn't seem like that's a
Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah. And I think that's something that everybody experiences. And like, honestly, like nobody cares about it more than we do and thinking it's the biggest deal in the world. Everyone's going to think I'm this, like, but everyone's going to think that I should have stayed in this corporate job because nobody actually really does think that much about anybody outside of their own, like,
Right.
themselves and their family. So I wanted to talk with you though, because you mentioned your mindset and you mentioned some of the shifts that you had. And you shared
Uh-huh.
with me that you've had a love-hate relationship with money. Like you were working no weekends for businesses, no money. You mentioned no money. I think a
No
lot of
money.
listeners can relate to that. Can you tell us about what helped you shift into knowing that you should be getting paid what you're worth?
And I'm still working on that, by the way. I'm still work like it is
Mhm.
still a work. I feel like it's a work in progress. Like I when it's yours.
Hmm.
So I never used to carry business cards
Hmm.
for my stores. Think about that.
Yeah.
Like I'd be wearing my clothes from the stores and I wouldn't have business cards with me. I
Hmm.
had business cards,
Yeah.
I wouldn't carry them because I felt like there was something, I don't know, wrong about pushing my business.
Self-promotion, talking about your, yeah, no, I think that there's a lot of times where we think about, and you know, mentioned it before, I've talked to some people that represent other products, other companies, and they're very, very, very good at talking about other people's business or getting, you know, oh, you love this? I got this here. I got this here. This is how much I paid for it. This is where you can go get it, about something we find at TJ Maxx. However, this is your your
It's
brand, your clothes. And so I think there is that feeling of I can't I can't try to be too success. I have to be a little bit smaller
and
because
wanting money, right? Wanting money.
yeah.
For me, I grew up during like Wall Street, like 80s, like
Yeah.
greed is good and all that. And I feel like all those movies, all they really taught you was, you shouldn't be greedy. Like there's something like that's
Yeah.
greed,
Yeah.
right? The
Hmm.
want of money, is
Hmm.
like a bit bad thing.
Yeah.
And so what first started it for me to make the shift was this idea that if I wanted to continue doing something and making an impact and doing what I need the money.
Mm.
It's not a luxury, there's a certain amount of money that needs to come in to fuel that. And then there was also this idea of like I was never one to ask for a raise
Mm.
or but I would feel like I was maybe like being underpaid
Yeah.
or and it was funny in my day job, like, a year and a half ago, it was like the first time I kind of advocated for myself and I had a specific number
Hmm.
in my head. And I don't know, something like, why shouldn't I ask for what I know? And I did research. Like I wasn't asking for a number that was like a crazy number. And I got it.
Hmm.
And I don't know, there was something like it felt right.
Yeah.
And I feel like the more you kind of dip your toe into it and you have some success with it
Mhm.
and you know you're that I know that I'm bringing value every day. I look at how much I bring into the company I do. That's just how I
Mhm.
was raised. And it's like, okay, closed this deal for this, sold this. We had this amount of, this amount of orders coming in. Like I know I worked towards that. I knew what I brought to the
Mhm.
business. And so for me, it was that last step of advocating that I
Yeah.
couldn't get beyond. And so, once I think I crossed that, it's really important because now that I do consulting too, I feel like I needed to learn that lesson
Hmm.
before consulting because consulting to me is even different than a salary, right?
Yeah.
Like it's, you're commanding an amount and to a certain extent we feel like we need to justify that amount and sometimes people think it's the like that actual job that you're doing that specific project but it's really the 30 plus years of experience that you bring into that and getting used to that but I do feel like the more you do it it
Mhm.
gets easier.
Yeah, and I think that it's definitely something I learned. I noticed this in corporate, and I've always been. I think I saw the same movies in the 80s and had the other perspective, being like, "Whoa, I could actually like make money investing other people's money, and not even like what." So I thought investing was like this was exactly what I needed to figure out. But when I was in corporate, and I'd been on the side of being a individual contributor, being a manager, and I think a lot of people assume that everybody remembers exactly what you did that whole, season, and they don't. And so I would keep, and I tell this to some of my clients too, when they're talking about going negotiating for a raise or talking to, and it's easier when you have evidence and proof, because I think our brains want to be like, no, 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 they're going to fire you. Worst case scenario, you're going to be let go. They're going to think you're super selfish. They're going to think you're terrible. But if you say, I closed this, I did this, I got this done and this done, that just kind of builds that folder. I had an email folder. And it was basically when I
Yes.
would get something completed or I'd work on a project, I would keep that there. And then it wasn't just to make me feel better about myself. When it was time to talk about bonuses or salary or negotiate, I wanted it to make it as easy as possible for my manager to be like, okay, yeah, because we had a grid. Some people would be here, most people would be in the middle, and then some at the bottom. It was like a bell curve. I knew how it
Yeah,
worked.
yeah, yeah.
I wanted to make it as easy as possible for that person to make that decision and have it be to promote me or to, and because there was all the proof. They
Right.
didn't have to say it was favoritism or it was this, or they just had these feelings. Like, and I think a lot of people don't do that because they think, but they should remember. They should know
I
this was
don't.
important. There's a lot of other things going on. There's plenty of other people that report to them. They don't. So don't assume they do. But also, it is intimidating to ask. I think a lot of people, a lot of women feel like, but they're going to think I'm greedy. And then they wonder why
Yes.
somebody is getting so much more for the
Well, and
same job than them. Because
I
some
do.
men weren't trained to feel like that's greedy, to be like, I need money to pay my bills and support my family. They're conditioned to do that.
Yeah, that to me is the norm for them.
That's normal. That's normal. And so I think that is something that a lot of women having that keeping being your own biggest cheerleader, having those things that can kind of tell your brain, yes, you do deserve it. Do some research. What does this role pay? If I went
Yeah,
to get another job in the same industry, would they be paying me $20,000 more, $10,000 more, equity, all of that? And then you just kind of, then your brain learns that. Like, okay,
yeah.
this is fair. And fair is something that I think a lot of people can get behind. Because that sounds different than I just want more money because I like having money and I like
I
spending
want more
money,
money.
which is
Yeah.
also totally fine. I like money, I like spending money. Um,
But
but
to your point about keeping that list, so what it did for me was twofold. Like I did the same thing. So it was really funny because I put off asking because I wanted to complete
mm,
my list. And I had
yeah,
been working on my list for a couple
yeah.
of weeks. It's really funny because he came to me to say, you need a raise.
Mhm.
And I had already been, so I was already almost
You're
at
doing
the
the
end. So it
work.
was really weird how it happened.
Yeah,
Um, and but what having that list also does is it gives you the confidence
yeah.
because you go, oh yeah, I did this and I did this and I did this. And so any part of you that was thinking, oh, am I being greedy? Or am I you by the time you get through that list, you go, yeah,
Yeah.
I should be asking. What am I crazy? Like I should be asking
No,
for
and I had some people that would ask for raises and promotions that had done nothing. They'd done like a mediocre job, but they felt like entitled to it.
right,
And so it was funny how you'd have these people who are getting everything done behind the scenes quietly, maybe not even taking credit for any of the work. And then all of a sudden there would be somebody else being like, I've been here 6 months, I deserve a raise. And I'm like, what? Like, no. But it was interesting when it was the men versus the women.
it's a different mentality.
And they're not, it doesn't mean I'm going to say yes, but it didn't mean I was going to fire him for asking either. It was
No,
just like, okay, no, but maybe if you work on this or do some of these things, then we could talk about it. Meanwhile, the other, some other people would be absolutely probably going home, maybe being pissed off or frustrated because they didn't get promoted or I wasn't coming to talk to them. And I was like, we have kind of corporate structure. This is the time period that it happens, but who knows if some of those conversations that we have in our head would go
right.
very differently if we had them out loud with a person.
And I also kind of feel like putting it out there, right? Even if I didn't get the amount that I wanted to, then we could work towards it. Or you, to your point, like when you like other people who might be going home frustrated,
Mhm.
like you kind of do that to yourself if
Yeah.
you don't ask.
Yes.
Like it'll be no
Mhm.
as long as you don't ask.
Absolutely. You're guaranteeing it's a no. Where like it might be a no. But I think if the thing about having done your research and your homework and having at least a good case for it. Almost like, if you were like a trial, like, okay, this is kind of like I'm coming up with evidence. I have done good work. Maybe it's not a yes right now, but it might be a yes in the future, or it might show that you are looking for something, some more, or that you're competent, that you're doing all these things. And I think that yeah, just assuming that people are just going to remember or know, especially they might need to not even know that it was you doing the work or how much you contributed. I think it's really, it's kind of like its own project. Just like
It
a small
is.
project to do that and to make sure, because when you get those opportunities to make more money, they don't come every single day when you're working in a corporate role or you're working, like when you're like with consulting, like you set your fee. You have to know what you bring to, you have to kind of set your pricing properly, which is also something that can be very tricky for entrepreneurs to do because they feel like, oh, I could sell this for this top tier price, but if it's my stuff, I should be giving it away, right? Because that's nicer.
Yeah.
So tell me
Well,
with
it's
the consulting
good.
business, tell me a little bit about with because you have the unique perspective of both sides, buyer, seller. What does that insider knowledge help you when you're training and talking to your consulting clients?
So I know what each side needs, right? So if you're a wholesale customer, I know when a buyer is making their decision, what they're looking at. So I'm really product, like product is my thing. So it really is about like understanding from the buyer side. If I'm working with a wholesaler, okay, it needs to be in this price point. It needs to be packaged this way. You need to put that in this kind of catalog. You need to have UPC, like all of like the
Mhm.
but there's also an understanding of the vision and the branding and how to align yourself appropriately and then how to sell it. On the other side, the buying side, so like from the retail side, it's interesting because I do feel like a lot of people, especially if they're smaller retailers, don't necessarily get trained.
Mhm.
It's sort of like I'm buying a store. Everybody wants to open a store.
Yeah.
Which is really
Oh,
funny.
people want to open a store, or you see people on like Bar Rescue or like TV shows, they want to open a restaurant or a bar because they like spending time in them. It's super fun, and they have
No business.
no knowledge of the behind the scenes that makes that experience
By the
pleasant.
way, that is my goal job is to be on Bravo and be like bar rescue, but
I
retail
love that idea
rescue.
because I feel like it's great to have that vision and to know what you do, but I do feel like there's a part of it, that whole that whole part behind the scenes, that is the reason why some are profitable and some are not. It
Yes.
is not that it's not that external piece.
It's
It's what you're helping
inventory
people do.
management. It's understanding what sell. Half of them, and I will tell you this because I'm on the wholesale side and I work with even big retailers. Do you know how many of them don't do the analysis or have the time to do the analysis necessary to? So, what happens is I walk into a store, and just from my years of having my own store and
Mhm.
department store, off price, like I've done it all. I walk in, and to me, I walk in and I say, is this spot paying for itself? Like every
Yeah.
piece, every footprint in a store should have a moneymaker on it. Even if you have other fun, you need those other fun things, right?
Hmm.
To make it interesting. But you also need to know your money makers. And I think there's an element of retail that is very sort of emotional,
Hmm.
and so people who open stores sometimes don't have that background to understand their inventory
Hmm.
turn or their sales per square foot or transitioning markdowns. When do you mark it down? When do you like all of those
Yeah.
things, which are to me, second nature. So I walk into a store and I'm immediately like, okay, like I'll travel for Periwinkle,
Hmm.
the jewelry company, the wholesale jewelry company, and I'll walk in and I'll talk about periwinkle for maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, and then it ends up always becoming about the rest of the store. Like and something be in the front, and I'm like, "Oh, is that still selling for you?" And they're like, "No," and I'm like, "Why is it still in the front of your store?"
Mm.
Like, like so there's this element of looking at things and understanding what should be happening, and I don't think that happens a lot. So it gets sometimes like it's just even small tweaks, and a
Hmm.
lot of times they instinctively kind of know like that's been sitting for a long time, it needs to move, or but they don't really know the process. So
And so is this process, because I know we talked about growing periwinkle sales by like 30%, is that it? Like, is it knowing the process? Because I feel like there's a lot of times where people like I seriously think they feel like they need to just do more of the same or more of what they're doing better. Where I think you're
no.
looking at it from a completely different perspective, not like, oh, this hasn't sold. I need to put it in more people's faces. It's like,
Right.
no,
like
like put
so
it in the back.
Right. So for me now in this side, I So my whole thing is be of service. And honestly, like, so we brought in an additional, so what's really funny is I got my raise and then I picked up for the company 1.5 million in sales last year, which, there's a part of me that I said to myself, well, thank God, because I would have felt really guilty if I had gotten a raise and didn't like earn it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then I was sort of like, oh yeah, I crushed that.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're doing differently than most wholesale companies is I always say be of service and remove the obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm lucky enough to have owners who understand this. And it's really about, it's jewelry. It's not a fine wine. It's not going to get better. You need to turn the inventory. So for me, it's partnering with retailers in a way that most brands don't. And it's, okay, if this item hasn't sold in 6 months, we're going to credit you for it and let's get you back into what's working. It's send me your selling so I can analyze it and see what's working, what's not working. It's really doing the work that they don't have the time to do, and partnering with them in a way where I'm almost like their fractional buyer for the line, where and not many sales managers have that expertise. So it's just kind of just and my boss, knowing this, I said, a buyer's not going to buy something if they can't see it. He created a whole system behind this idea of us assorting for people and suggesting the orders, where it's just an easy drag and drop for me. I can run sales and create these assortments for people based on what's really turning versus, oh, I like that style. And it's made all the difference in the world.
Oh, that's so smart. Removing the obstacles, making like that alone has so much value. And I think, it's interesting. People trained in different ways. And so even I think that's where having different roles, entrepreneurship, corporate, all of that, even if you feel like I can't believe, I'm not using the degree that I paid this much money for. I'm doing something totally different. I switched from this job to that. All of it is building up that knowledge. And you don't know exactly where it's going to fit in, but usually somewhere along the line, whether it's that fractional and whatever it was that person needed that they didn't have in their traditional sales team, that can make such a massive difference. And so it's not necessarily going to be one training session that teaches you all the things you need to know. So I think that's great that you figured it out how to help people with everything that you've learned in your journey. So it was so wonderful to meet you today. I would love for you to no, this has been such a great conversation. I love what you're doing. I would absolutely watch that show if you were the bar rescue of fashion. It's just very fascinating to me because I feel like these people have these best intentions, good heart, all of that, but there's something missing that I feel like somebody like you can certainly help with. How can people find you if they want to learn more about you, or any of the businesses?
So really, Good Robe and Co. Is what I'm on Instagram with, what I'm on Facebook with, and then LinkedIn. I'm just Jennifer Cassara. But honestly, if you went to Good Robe and Co., it's me.
All right.
So if you send me a message, you're gonna get to me. That's honestly, I want to say it's so funny. Instagram is where I get the most, but if they went to the goodrobeandco.com, you can actually send messages as well through the website. So, and it's a great place to see the collection. So yeah, I would love that.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm a huge fan. I'm going to go check out the website, and I hope everybody, if you're listening and you felt somewhat inspired by this conversation, please go review the show, share it. I think it was such a helpful conversation to learn, different sides of business and entrepreneurship and those money stories that we tell ourselves that we all could use some work on. If you're looking to work on your own financial future and you'd like to set up a time to chat with me, please head over to mistylynch.com, or you can find me at soundviewfinancialadvisors.com. Take care, and we'll talk again next week. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.